They broke into my property at dawn with bolt cutters, trying to steal a boat that once belonged to my late grandfather. What they didn't know was, I legally owned the entire lake they were standing on. Picture this. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. I'm sipping coffee, watching through my kitchen window as Karen Brightwater, the whole president who moved here just 3 years ago, marches toward my dock. With her are two board members and a sheriff's deputy. The lake is wrapped in morning mist. The old dock creaks under their steps, and there sits my grandfather's 1985 cabin cruiser. Karen's waving a piece of paper like it's a sword. A notice demanding I remove my eyesore boat in 72 hours or face $500 a day fines. What she didn't realize, she was starting a war with a Navy veteran who inherited more than just a boat. What would you do if a power-hungry hoe tried to steal your family's legacy? Drop your worst hoe nightmare in the comments. Where are you watching from? My name's Marcus Wendell. I'm 52, a retired Navy engineer, and apparently Karen Brightwater's biggest headache since the day she moved into our quiet Lake Meridian community with her big city dreams and bigger attitude. Let me paint you the picture. Lake Meridian is 90 minutes west of Denver, a pristine 200-acre lake surrounded by 47 homes, many built by the original families. My grandfather Clifford bought what people call worthless swamp land back in 1982 for $8,000, about what Karen probably spent on monthly Botox. Clifford was a carpenter who believed in doing things right. He spent 2 summers hand-building our cabin and dock from cedar planks that still smell like Christmas when the sun hits them. He used to tell me about fighting off mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds while driving posts into the lake bed with nothing but a sledgehammer and sheer determination. Back then, this was a community of working families. Kids knew how to bait their own hooks. Neighbors helped you move a fridge just for a cold beer and a good story. But things change. Enter Karen Brightwater, real estate agent, whole president, and the type who probably makes her pool boy sign an NDA. She showed up in her BMW, dripping perfume strong enough to choke a moose, pointing at my grandfather's boat like it was roadkill. That eyesore is dragging down property values, she declared. No introductions, nothing. I showed her the boat registration, the dock permits, and the property surveys. All legal, all filed since 1983. I don't care about your paperwork, she snapped, stamping her foot like a toddler. We have community standards. And that's when I knew this wasn't about the boat. She was testing how much she could push the old families before we'd push back. Her plan became obvious. She formed this hoe in 2018 with newer Denver transplants who saw dollar signs instead of memories when they looked at our lake. The goal? Pressure old families to sell cheap, then flip the land to rich buyers craving exclusive lakefront property. My boat was just her opening move. 3 other families got harassment letters too. The Hendersons were told their vegetable garden violated community vision. The Torinos. Their kids' tire swing was suddenly a liability. But here's the thing about Navy veterans. We don't fold under pressure. We dig in. And when someone tries to steal something built by our grandfathers, we fight back with everything we've got. That boat isn't just transportation. It's a piece of family history. I still fish from it every weekend. My grandfather's old tackle boxes are in the cabin, full of lures he swore could catch fish in a bathtub. The smell of marine diesel and worn leather still lingers stronger than Karen's perfume, and a hell of a lot more honest. She filed her first official whole complaint on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was crumpling that flimsy letter in my calloused hands, watching it fall apart just like her chances of bullying me. But that was only the beginning. Karen wasn't done, and neither was I. Her first real power play came a week later. She called an emergency whole meeting on a Thursday night, timed perfectly when most working families couldn't make it. But her retired Denver buddies could pack the room. I showed up anyway, straight from fixing Mrs. Patterson's dock. My hands smelled like lake water and sweat, while the community center reeked of cologne and entitlement. Karen stood front and center with a slick PowerPoint presentation, probably cost more to make than my grandfather's boat. Slide 1. Community Beautification Initiative, maintaining property values through aesthetic standards. The proposal was pure cruelty wrapped in fancy language. All watercraft must meet visual compatibility requirements. Annual inspections, $500. Boats older than 20 years. Full restoration required. Translation: spend 10 grand or get out. Oh, and a new $2,000 yearly watercraft assessment for the privilege of keeping your boat on the lake. The 23 newer residents nodded like bobbleheads, while the 7 original families sat in shock. Karen even brought charts showing how similar measures boosted property values in Aspen and Vail. But two could play the research game. I'd spent that week in the Jefferson County Courthouse, digging through dusty old records. Navy life taught me that good intel beats firepower every time. And what I found made me smile for the first time in weeks. Karen's little scheme had a fatal flaw. In Colorado, new HOA fees or rule changes need approval from 67% of all homeowners, not just the people who show up. Karen's meeting? Barely 30 people in a community of 47. Simple math, but clearly beyond Karen's real estate license education. The real bombshell was hidden in the original incorporation documents. When the HOA was formed back in 2018, 8 of the original homeowners, including me, never signed. And those signatures weren't optional. They were legally required. Without them, Karen's entire empire was nothing more than a very expensive house of cards. I waited until she wrapped up her presentation, then stood. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry wasps as I cleared my throat. Ms. Brightwater, I have a question about your legal authority to impose these fees. Her smile cracked, just slightly. The whole board has full discretionary power over community standards, Mr. Wendell. Actually, you don't. I pulled out a thick manila folder stuffed with photocopies. Your 2018 incorporation is invalid. You're missing signatures from 15% of original homeowners, as required by Colorado Revised Statutes 38 to 33. The room went silent, except for that buzzing light and the sound of Karen's world starting to collapse. Her slick Denver lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, flipping through his papers like a drowning man searching for a life preserver. And furthermore, I pressed on, enjoying the way Karen's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. The original homesteads have perpetual waterfront access rights that predate your HOA by 36 years. That's when Karen showed me exactly who she really was. Instead of admitting defeat, she went nuclear. Mr. Wendell, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I've received multiple complaints about your aggressive behavior toward community members. Your military background makes residents fear for their safety. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Me? Aggressive? I'd help half these people move furniture, fix their plumbing for free, taught their kids to fish. But I could see it working on the newer residents, the subtle poison that maybe the veteran was unstable. Dangerous. One bad day away from snapping. In fact, Karen continued, smelling blood in the water. I'll be filing a formal harassment complaint with the sheriff's office. We have documentation of you intimidating neighbors with your so-called questions about HOA legitimacy. Brilliant. Evil. She twisted my research into stalking, my legal questions into threats. She cast herself as the protector, and me as the dangerous ex-soldier. Deputy Jim Torino, whose family had lived here almost as long as mine, caught me afterward in the parking lot. The gravel crunched under our boots as he lit a cigarette with the hands of a man who'd worked construction for 30 years. Watch yourself, Marcus, he muttered. Karen's got friends downtown. Political friends who owe her favors from her real estate deals. Driving home that night, my headlights slicing through mountain darkness, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Plain white paper. Block letters. Check the lake deed. Not everything is what it seems. A friend. That note burned a hole in my pocket for 3 days before I worked up the courage to act. Karen didn't waste time licking her wounds. Within 48 hours, she escalated like a fire in an ammunition depot. She formed the so-called Lake Meridian Improvement Committee, a $50,000 war chest raised from gullible new residents who wanted HOA revenge. The first sign of her plan showed up on a Tuesday morning. Private security boats patrolling the lake like we were running a drug smuggling ring. Two guys in polos and wraparound shades, circling in a sleek speedboat worth more than most people's cars. They'd idle near my dock for 20 minutes, snapping photos and scribbling notes on waterproof clipboards. Then came the signs, giant orange warnings posted everywhere. No unauthorized watercraft. Violators will be prosecuted. The language sounded official, but it was pure theater. Karen was betting that most people wouldn't know the difference between real authority and something that just looked expensive. That's when I knew I needed real help. So I followed the mysterious tip and drove to the state archives in Denver. The building reeked of old paper and burned government coffee. The clerk who helped me looked like she'd been working there since Colorado became a state. "You want the original land surveys from 1981?" she asked, squinting at me over glasses held together with electrical tape. "Those are in the basement vault. Nobody's touched those in 15 years." She came back with manila folders as thick as phone books, covered in so much dust they made me sneeze. Buried inside was a detail that nearly knocked me over. Back in my Navy days, I'd learned that property disputes often come down to whoever has the oldest, most accurate records. With GPS, thousands of boundary errors from the pre-satellite era had been exposed, sometimes shifting property lines by hundreds of feet, fortunes won or lost overnight. And what I found there would have made Karen faint. The original 1981 land survey showed that Lake Meridian's boundaries were incorrectly recorded in every deed filed after 1983. Modern GPS proved that what everyone thought was a single lake was actually two separate bodies of water, divided by an underwater ridge visible only on the original topographic maps. Lake Meridian North, the fancy houses, and Karen's dream marina project. And Lake Meridian South, a smaller, untouched lake that, according to the deed in my hands, my grandfather hadn't just bought a piece of. He bought the entire thing. All water rights, all mineral rights, all access easements. The faded typewritten deed was clear. Clifford Wendell owned Lake Meridian South. He wasn't just a bargain hunter. He was a visionary. Owning water in Colorado was like owning liquid gold. But Karen, too busy playing dictator, had no idea. Her harassment campaign went into overdrive that same week. Surveillance cameras appeared overnight, pointing straight at my dock. Certified letters carrying $500 daily fines arrived with the persistence of bill collectors and twice the venom. And then she made her biggest mistake. She started whispering around town that I was a mentally unstable veteran, a ticking time bomb. The grocery store, the gas station, always framed as concern for safety. Subtle, effective, poisonous. I consulted an attorney through the Veterans Legal Aid Program, a sharp woman who'd spent 20 years fighting water rights cases across the western states. She explained something that made my Navy heart beat with tactical joy. In Colorado and most western states, water rights follow the prior appropriation doctrine. That means the first person to put water to beneficial use has absolute priority over anyone who comes after. First in time, first in right. A principle born in the gold rush era and still rocks solid law today. The attorney confirmed exactly what those dusty archives had revealed. I didn't just own a boat slip or lake access. I owned the lake bed, the water column, and every single recreational right for the entire southern section of Lake Meridian. That night, as I sat on my grandfather's dock listening to the water that apparently belonged to me, I could smell diesel fumes contaminating the air. Karen's so-called security boats were leaking fuel into water they had no legal right to patrol, violating both my property rights and half a dozen environmental laws. Then the crunch of gravel in my driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. Unmarked cars had been circling every hour since the rumors started, and red survey lasers danced across the lake's surface like some kind of high-tech light show. Karen thought she was tightening the noose. She had no idea she was walking into a trap that had been set 40 years ago. Her next move proved she'd completely lost her mind. On a peaceful Saturday morning, while I was hosting a barbecue for my nephew's birthday, A process server showed up with a restraining order, claiming I'd threatened her at a public meeting. Picture this: 12 family members, 3 kids under 10, standing there watching Uncle Marcus get served legal papers while hamburgers burned on the grill. The server, a kid barely old enough to shave, stammered through his lines about staying 500 feet away from Karen while my 8-year-old niece asked why the man was trying to arrest me. Maximum humiliation. Perfectly timed. Karen had choreographed the whole scene like a Broadway production. I had to admire the pure malice of it, even as my blood pressure spiked high enough to power a small city. But if Karen thought she could embarrass me into surrender, she had no idea what 40 years of military bureaucracy had taught me about patience and methodical planning. While she called Denver TV stations about the troubled veteran terrorizing a peaceful community, I quietly built the kind of documentation that wins court cases. Every harassment incident, photographed, timestamped, GPS tag. Every conversation, recorded perfectly legal in Colorado, where only one party needs to consent. Every witness statement, notarized and filed. I'd learned this during a property dispute back in Virginia Beach, when a neighbor tried to claim our fence sat on his land. Judges don't care for angry stories. They love organized evidence. Documentation beats emotion every single time. Then came the survey. The professional land survey I commissioned revealed something Karen had no idea about. Not only did I own the smaller lake, but my property line also extended 50 feet into the larger lake, where every single dock on the North Shore had been built. Those fancy waterfront homes weren't just near my property. They were partly on it. Karen's smear campaign ramped up like a propaganda war. She created a Facebook group called Concerned Lake Meridian Residents, posting carefully cropped photos of my grandfather's boat and cabin. The old cabin cruiser suddenly looked like hurricane wreckage, and my rustic cabin like something ready for demolition. She organized safety patrols, whole vigilantes in matching visors who cruised by every hour like some suburban Gestapo. The harassment was relentless, calculated to make me break under the pressure. But Karen's intel gathering had a blind spot. She tried to recruit my neighbor, Ezra Blackston, a 78-year-old retired school teacher who taught 8th grade for 40 years. She figured he'd be easy to manipulate. Bad mistake. Ezra could spot a con artist from 3 counties away. She offered me $200,000 for my cabin. Ezra told me over coffee that tasted like motor oil and wisdom. Cash. Close in 30 days. But the county assessor says my place is worth $70,000 at best. Someone paying triple market value always knows something the seller doesn't: oil, minerals, or some development plan that'll make millions. Karen wasn't being generous. She was trying to strip generational wealth from families who built this community with their bare hands. From there, the harassment escalated into outright sabotage. My mailbox got smashed with bats 3 times in 1 week, spray painted with profanity, and once stuffed with a bag of dog waste. Real classy touches. Then someone poured sugar into my boat's fuel tank, causing $1,200 in damage. The mechanic shook his head as he showed me the crystallized mess in my injectors. "Seen this before," he said, wiping his hands on coveralls that had survived decades. "Usually happens in divorces or neighbor feuds. Sugar doesn't dissolve in gas, just turns everything into expensive syrup." Meanwhile, anonymous calls to the VA claimed I was unstable, triggering humiliating wellness checks by social workers asking about my mental health. A paper trail designed to back up Karen's narrative about the dangerous veteran. But Karen's biggest blunder came when she scheduled an emergency community meeting for Labor Day weekend. Only one item on the agenda: final vote on watercraft removal and security expansion. She was forcing a showdown, betting I either cave or snap, proving her case for her. That weekend, the acrid smoke from a nearby controlled burn mixed with the sticky residue of harassment flyers taped all over my truck. The constant drone of security boats had replaced birdsong with hum of Karen's paranoia. As I peeled those flyers off my windshield, feeling the adhesive gum up under my fingernails, I realized she'd given me the perfect opportunity. She wanted a final showdown. Fine. Time to show her what happens when you corner a Navy veteran who spent 3 months building an airtight case. The phone call that changed everything came that Wednesday morning, as I sipped my coffee and watched Karen's security goons circle my lake like polo-shirted sharks. "Marcus, you need to sit down for this," she said, papers rustling through the phone. We ran a background check on Karen Brightwater. She's not just a real estate agent, she's a developer. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. "What do you mean?" "Mountain Vista Properties. That's her company. She already has purchase agreements for 12 lakefront homes, contingent on community improvements being approved. This whole harassment campaign, it's not personal, it's a business plan." The pieces clicked together like a perfectly planned demolition. Karen hadn't moved here for the scenery or the quiet community lifestyle. She came to pull off one of the most sophisticated property grabs I'd ever seen. And I'd been naive enough to think this was about my boat. My attorney kept reading from what sounded like a thick file. Her investors are a Denver development group with a $50 million budget for something called Lake Meridian Resort and Marina. They're planning to buy out all the original families at depressed prices, then flip the land into luxury condos with a private yacht club charging $500,000 membership fees. I'd seen this playbook before in my Navy days. Developers swarmed around bases whenever closure rumors spread, pressuring families into panic sales, then cashing in for massive profits. Legal barely, but devastating for communities built over generations. "And here's the part that will really make you angry," she said. "Karen needs your boat gone because it proves the original homeowners still have legitimate water rights. If people see you using the lake freely, it destroys her whole narrative about exclusive access for her resort." But the real bombshell came next. "Marcus, did you know your grandfather's deed includes something called perpetual easement rights across what's now the main community road?" I nearly dropped the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means Karen's entire development is impossible without your permission. Every truck, every construction crew, every future resort guest would have to cross your land to reach the marina. You don't just own the lake, you own the only legal access road." Suddenly, Karen's obsession made perfect sense. She wasn't just trying to remove an eyesore. She was trying to eliminate the single biggest threat to a $50 million project. My grandfather's $8,000 worthless swampland purchase had accidentally checkmated a scheme 40 years in the making. "And there's more," my attorney continued, satisfaction in her voice. "Lake Meridian South is designated as critical wildlife habitat for Colorado River cutthroat trout. Your grandfather signed a conservation easement in 1984. That locks the land against commercial development forever and brings huge federal protections. Environmental law beats local development every single time. Karen could dream about her marina, but the Endangered Species Act stood in her way, a legal fight that would cost millions and take decades. That's when Karen's lawyer finally called with the offer I've been expecting, delivered with the subtlety of a mobster in a B-movie. $500,000 cash for a quiet sale, with veiled references to unfortunate accidents that sometimes happen to stubborn homeowners. 48 hours to decide before the community takes matters into their own hands. I hung up and walked out to my dock, staring across water that, apparently, was mine, protected by laws Karen had never even researched. The morning sun turned the lake into liquid gold. The air smelled clean and sharp, untouched by the diesel fumes of her security boats. Karen Brightwater had just made the biggest mistake of her life, threatening a Navy veteran who now knew exactly what she was trying to steal. Time to show her what real strategy looked like. The war room I set up in my grandfather's cabin looked like a makeshift intelligence hub. 3 folding tables covered in legal documents, survey maps, environmental reports, and a timeline of harassment long enough to make a federal prosecutor weep. My veterans legal aid attorney had connected me with an environmental law clinic at the University of Colorado. Soon, I had a whole team of eager law students treating Karen's scheme like their personal crusade against corporate greed. The lead attorney, Rebecca Martinez, 15 years of water rights battles under her belt, laid out the plan with surgical precision. We're not just stopping Karen. We're going to dismantle her entire operation so thoroughly no developer will ever try this again. Step 1. Discovery. An underwater archaeological survey. Lost students with endless time dug through databases and found what professionals miss. At the lake bottom were artifacts from a Ute fishing camp dating back 300 years. That triggered federal archaeological protections, making Karen's marina about as legal as building a casino in Yellowstone. I knew from my Navy days, environmental regulations are like icebergs. What you see is nothing compared to what's hidden beneath. One call to the State Historical Preservation Office, and archaeologists confirmed the findings. Lake Meridian South was now under the National Historic Preservation Act. Meanwhile, Ezra Blackston proved to be more than just a friendly neighbor. He'd been organizing resistance movements longer than Karen had been alive. Within a week, he built the original Families Coalition, 7 households representing 4 decades of lake history, each bringing proof of Karen's harassment campaign. I've been teaching kids for 40 years, Ezra said, adjusting his old glasses. You learn to spot bullies early, and the best way to stop them, make them face consequences in front of everyone they're trying to impress. Deputy Jim Torino quietly provided something even more valuable than support: police report numbers. Every false complaint, every bogus wellness check, every harassment claim Karen had filed, documented in official records. And when law enforcement sees the same name filing reports every week, motives get questioned. The media strategy formed like a jigsaw puzzle snapping together. Rebecca had contacts at the Denver Post, reporters who thrived on David versus Goliath stories of small communities fighting off corporate predators. Karen's scheme had every ingredient for a front-page, Pulitzer-level investigation. Local newspapers thrive on stories like this, Rebecca explained, flipping through a legal brief thick enough to stop a bullet. Environmental destruction, veteran harassment, corporate greed, federal law violations. This case had it all. The kind of things readers love to hate. The technical documentation stage exposed just how deep Karen's environmental crimes went. Water quality tests I'd commissioned showed her security boats leaked enough fuel to violate the Clean Water Act in 17 different ways. Every patrol left behind petroleum contamination, triggering potential EPA fines of $25,000 per day. Through my own research, I discovered that any citizen can request EPA water quality violation records under the Freedom of Information Act. When I checked, the database showed 0 violations at Lake Meridian until Karen's boats started patrolling. The before and after timeline was crystal clear, and environmental prosecutors would have loved it. GPS coordinates also proved Karen had illegally posted her orange warning signs on federal conservation land. The irony was stunning. While threatening to have me arrested for trespassing, she herself had been committing federal crimes every day for 3 months. But financial warfare required different tools. My attorney calculated damages that nearly made my eyes water. $50,000 in harassment costs, $2.5 million in lost property value from her defamation, plus 6-figure environmental cleanup costs. Karen's Mountain Vista Properties was about to face lawsuits that could wipe out her $50 million development fund overnight. My personal favorite weapon was the Colorado Real Estate Commission complaint. Real estate agents can lose their licenses for conflicts of interest, and Karen had been negotiating home sales while simultaneously harassing those same homeowners as HOA president. Professional ethics violations alone could end her career, even if she somehow escaped criminal charges. The evidence filled 3 bankers' boxes, 847 photographs, 23 hours of audio recordings, and financial records proving Karen's company had secured development permits before she even moved into our community. As I stacked the final folders, breathing in the sharp scent of fresh ink, I ran my fingers over the business cards of new allies, attorneys, environmental groups, investigative reporters, and federal agents who'd built careers dismantling scams just like Karen's. The trap was ready. All I had to do now was wait for her to walk into it. And she did. Karen's desperation exploded as her Labor Day deadline closed in, and I refused to back down. Desperate people make reckless mistakes, and Karen was about to make enough to fill a federal indictment. The first sign came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. My infrared security cameras caught three figures dumping motor oil near my dock. The night vision footage was crystal clear. Karen herself, along with two whole board members, dressed in black, pouring automotive waste into pristine lake water like some suburban eco-terrorist cell. I'd installed those cameras after hard lessons from my Norfolk days. Always document everything when dealing with people who think the rules don't apply to them. The system captured not only their faces, but also the license plate of Karen's BMW as they sped off like guilty teenagers after a prank gone wrong. By 6 a.m., the footage was uploaded to a secure cloud and sent to my attorney, Deputy Torino, and the EPA's Environmental Crimes Hotline. In Colorado, property owners can legally record 24/7 surveillance. And what I captured was enough to charge Karen with criminal environmental destruction. But she wasn't done digging her own grave. That very morning, Karen filed a false report with the EPA, accusing me of polluting the lake with boat fuel. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. She was literally dumping motor oil into water she didn't own, while accusing me of the same crime. The EPA inspector who responded was a no-nonsense veteran investigator. She glanced at my spotless boat maintenance records and recent water tests, then knelt by the water's edge with equipment worth more than a car. "Sir," she said, "this petroleum doesn't match marine diesel. It's automotive motor oil, and it was dumped here recently." Karen's smear campaign escalated into something straight out of a dictatorship. She pressured county commissioners, claiming I was a dangerous veteran who threatened public safety. She organized a petition demanding a psychiatric evaluation and planted fake online reviews questioning my military service. But every move just gave us more evidence. Fake reviews violated federal laws protecting veterans. Forcing psychiatric evaluations could be seen as disability harassment under Colorado law. And commissioners began doubting her credibility when the same woman filed complaint after complaint against the same man. Her hired collection agency added to my case by trying to place a fraudulent lien on my property. Problem was, my home wasn't even under HOA authority. That blunder created a paper trail of attempted property theft, enough to make prosecutors grin. I knew from past disputes that false liens can be challenged within 30 days and carry heavy penalties, including attorneys' fees and damages. This wasn't just illegal, it was reckless enough for mail fraud charges. Meanwhile, my homeowner's insurance launched their own investigation into the mysterious boat damage. Their fraud investigator, a former FBI agent, quickly linked Karen's tactics to suspicious incidents in 3 other Colorado communities where she developed properties. "Mr. Wendell," she told me at my kitchen table, "your case isn't unique. We've documented identical harassment in Breckenridge, Steamboat Springs, and Grand Junction. Same developer, same tactics, same accidents." Karen's harassment reached absurd levels. Supporters blocked my driveway with parked cars, made harassing phone calls around the clock, and even posted my military records online, blatantly violating federal privacy laws. Each incident was documented and added to the growing evidence pile, which was beginning to look like the foundation of a racketeering case. But the sweetest victory came when the Denver Post ran the first article in what would become a full investigative series on HOA abuse. The headline read, "Veteran Harassment Scheme Targets Military Families Across Colorado." Karen's carefully polished public image shattered faster than a house built on lake ice. Environmental groups brought forward proof of other shady development schemes, and soon TV news crews were circling the lake like it was a live documentary on corporate predators in the wild. The constant buzz of camera drones mixed with the sharp smell of flash powder from photographers made the place feel less like a neighborhood and more like a crime scene investigation. My attorney filed a formal complaint with Colorado's Attorney General, outlining HOA fraud, financial losses from missed work due to endless legal harassment, medical bills from stress-related health issues, and skyrocketing security expenses that were draining my Navy pension faster than Karen could say community standards. The media attention was growing like an avalanche, and Karen was standing right in its path. Her last desperate move proved just how unhinged she'd become. She actually hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my military service. She thought she'd find some scandal to justify her harassment. Instead, what came back looked more like a Captain America highlight reel. The PI's report, which I got through my attorney's discovery process, read like a military award ceremony: a Navy Cross for saving 12 sailors during a shipboard fire off Somalia, multiple commendations for environmental cleanup projects on 3 different bases, and a spotless 22-year service record with 0 disciplinary actions. But then Karen's desperation crossed into outright criminality. She tried to bribe Deputy Torino into filing a false arrest warrant against me. It happened in the parking lot of Miller's Hardware, where Jim had stopped to buy fence posts. Karen cornered him with an envelope stuffed with $5,000 in cash. "Just file a domestic disturbance report," she begged on the recording Jim made with his phone. "Say you got an anonymous tip about violent threats. We'll sort out the details later." Jim had been a cop for 15 years. He knew bribery when he heard it, and he knew recording it wasn't just legal in Colorado. It was practically mandatory when someone was actively trying to frame innocent people. That recording landed on the FBI's desk, and the Environmental Crimes Unit opened a full case after connecting Karen's harassment to a multi-state pattern. Turns out, her Mountain Vista properties had been pulling the same scam in Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, targeting veterans and retirees with surgical precision. What I thought was personal harassment turned out to be a federal criminal enterprise. Once the FBI investigation became public, Karen's Denver investors bailed faster than tourists running from a wildfire. Overnight, $50 million in development funds vanished as headlines screamed: "Federal investigation into HOA fraud and veteran harassment scheme." The house of cards collapsed instantly. 2 HOA board members resigned, citing ethical concerns, which everyone knew was code for "We're jumping ship before the FBI knocks on our door." The final blow came from Karen's own assistant, Sarah, the whistleblower who'd been secretly working with federal investigators for months. She handed over recordings of Karen admitting to environmental sabotage, property fraud, and even conspiracy to frame veterans. "She told me to plant evidence of fuel leaks near your dock and then call the EPA to report you," Sarah testified. "When I refused, she threatened to fire me and ruin my career." National media swarmed the story like sharks smelling blood. HOA Harass's war hero became a cable news sensation. Environmental groups launched a Save Lake Meridian campaign that drew supporters from across the country. My GoFund for legal fees hit $75,000 in just 48 hours from people who'd faced similar HOA nightmares. Karen's empire collapsed piece by piece. The private security company quit after learning they'd been operating without permits on federal land. The collection agency backed off once they realized the liens they'd filed were fraudulent. Even Karen's own Denver lawyer walked away after seeing the mountain of evidence against her. But Karen wasn't done lashing out. She confronted me outside Miller's Hardware, the same place she'd tried bribing Torino. As I carried dock repair supplies to my truck, she stormed up, face twisted with rage. "This is all your fault," she screamed loud enough for half the town to hear. "You could have just moved your stupid boat, but no, you had to ruin everything." 3 witnesses and the parking lot cameras captured her threatening me with violence, vowing I'd regret crossing her, and warning that accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. That night, someone spray-painted "Traitor" across my truck in letters so huge they could have been read from space. Store security footage caught Karen's BMW pulling in at 2 a.m. and leaving 5 minutes later. Solid evidence for new vandalism charges that violated her bail conditions. As I stood there on the phone with Torino, the acrid paint fumes stinging my nose, I realized something. Karen had given me the perfect setup for our final showdown. She'd scheduled one last community vote to remove dangerous elements, planning to present her forged evidence and close this war once and for all. Fine by me. Time to finish it. The Lake Meridian Community Center had never seen anything like what happened that Labor Day evening. 200 people crammed into a hall built for 50. News crews from Denver's biggest stations, national environmental reporters, and federal agents lining the back like silent judges. Karen had no clue she was walking into her own execution. She strutted in with what she thought was her winning presentation: fake water quality reports and staged photos of supposed contamination from my boat. The woman actually thought she could lie her way out of federal charges, while FBI agents were sitting just 6 feet away taking notes. I sat in the front row with my legal team, watching Karen set up her PowerPoint with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences in her privileged life. The projector flickered to life with her opening slide: protecting our community. Final actions against environmental threats. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen announced with all the dramatic flair of a prosecutor closing a murder trial, tonight we vote to permanently remove the environmental hazard that threatens our beautiful lake community. She clicked to her first fabricated photo: my grandfather's boat, with digitally added oil stains in the water around it. It looked convincing enough to fool casual observers. But she made one fatal mistake. She had photoshopped pollution into waters that legally belonged to me, not the community. As you can see, Karen continued, pointing at her fake evidence with a trembling laser pointer. This vessel has been leaking petroleum products into our pristine waters for months. That's when I stood up. The room went dead silent, except for the whir of news cameras swiveling toward what everyone sensed would be the climax of this circus. Ms. Brightwater, I said, my voice steady with the authority that comes from 22 years of Navy service. I have a question about your jurisdiction to regulate my property. Her laser pointer froze mid-gesture. The HOA has full authority over community waters, Mr. Wendell. Actually, you don't. I walked to the front and plugged in my laptop, replacing her lies with the legal truth. The first document filled the screen: my grandfather's original 1982 deed, signed and notarized in faded but undeniable ink. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, meet the legal owner of Lake Meridian South, my grandfather, Clifford Wendell. He didn't just buy lakefront property. He bought the entire body of water you've been fighting over. Gasps echoed like thunderclaps. Karen's face went pale as the weight of 40 years of legal consequences crashed down. I advanced to the next slide: professional survey results. Your marina development would be built entirely on my private property, which explains why you've been so desperate to drive me away. The room erupted in chatter as people realized Karen had tried to steal millions in lakefront property through an elaborate HOA harassment scheme. News cameras captured every second of her world collapsing. That's impossible, Karen shrieked, dropping all pretense of professionalism. Those documents are fake, part of some veteran conspiracy. Deputy Torino stepped forward, calm and ready. Ms. Brightwater, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a law enforcement officer, environmental crimes, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The click of handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I'd heard since my Navy discharge ceremony. And the real mic drop came when the EPA agent stood up. Mountain Vista Properties is under federal investigation for environmental fraud, veteran harassment, and racketeering across 4 states, Agent Martinez declared. Karen struggled against cuffs that weren't going anywhere. We've documented a pattern of targeting military families and fixed-income homeowners through systematic HOA abuse. The agent continued. Then the FBI joined in, serving warrants for her financial records tied to the harassment scheme. Turns out federal agencies had been quietly building a case that could land her 5 to 10 years in prison. But my favorite moment came when I made my final announcement. I'm offering to sell lake access easements to legitimate community members for $1 each. And I'm establishing the Clifford Wendell Memorial Wildlife Preserve to protect this lake forever. The room erupted in a standing ovation. News cameras rolled as Karen was led out in handcuffs through a crowd she'd spent months terrorizing. Her million-dollar development dreams dissolved into felony charges and permanent disgrace. Environmental groups hailed Lake Meridian as a model for community-led conservation. A reporter from the Denver Post told me her investigative series was being submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. Karen Brightwater had picked a fight with the wrong Navy veteran, and now the whole world was watching her pay. 6 months later, I sat on my grandfather's dock watching the sunrise paint the lake in gold. No more diesel fumes from harassment patrol boats, just the soft lap of clean water and the occasional splash of a Colorado cutthroat trout, the same endangered species that helped send Karen to prison. She eventually pled guilty to 17 federal charges, earning 18 months in prison and $200,000 in restitution. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, Mountain Vista Properties collapsed into bankruptcy, and investors lost $50 million in her schemes. My harassment lawsuit against her settled for $1.2 million, money that gave me peace of mind and helped fund something even greater. When plea deals move that fast, it usually means the evidence was overwhelming. Karen's lawyers knew they were defending a client caught red-handed. The new HOA board, elected from both longtime families and fair-minded newer residents, now operates under bylaws requiring transparency and real legal authority. Property values jumped 40% after Lake Meridian was designated Colorado's first community protected watershed, proving conservation pays more than destruction. With the settlement money, I restored my grandfather's cabin into a family retreat that honors his memory and serves the community. The University of Colorado even partnered with us to establish a lake ecology research station, giving students hands-on experience while monitoring the ecosystem at no cost. Today, Lake Meridian is a model for 15 other communities fighting predatory developments. My grandfather's $8,000 swampland investment became the cornerstone of a conservation movement, protecting thousands of acres from corporate predators who thought rural families were easy targets. The Governor's Environmental Protection Award now sits proudly on my mantle, right beside my grandfather's old fishing photos, a reminder that the best way to honor the past is to protect the future. Families who once worried about losing everything saw their property values rise, thanks to permanent conservation protections. The Veteran Property Rights Legal Fund I created continues to help others fight back against HOA harassment. And Karen's downfall? It became a cautionary tale that inspired Colorado's legislature to pass the HOA Reform Act, finally requiring independent oversight of harassment complaints and adding criminal penalties for systematic intimidation. Her federal prosecution sent a clear message to developers across the West. Targeting veterans comes with serious consequences. The first Lake Meridian Conservation Festival drew more than 2,000 visitors. People came to celebrate community-led protection, enjoy fishing and hiking, and learn through environmental workshops. At the heart of it all was my grandfather's boat, Persistence, once Karen's so-called eyesore, now a symbol of how ordinary people can defeat corporate schemes with determination and legal preparation. The festival boosted our small town too. Local businesses reported their best sales in decades as visitors praised the pristine lake and the community that fought to save it. Events like this prove that protecting nature is not only morally right, but also economically smart. Today, teaching weekend workshops on property rights has become my retirement passion. Helping homeowners understand what they really own before HOA bullies try to take it away creates lasting change. And every successful defense makes the next Karen think twice about targeting rural families. The peace I've found through environmental education and community service feels like the reward my grandfather always wanted. His so-called worthless swamp land didn't just protect our family's legacy, it preserved an entire ecosystem for generations to come. And Karen Brightwater's name? Soon forgotten. Just last week, I received a letter from a veteran in Montana whose HOA is trying to steal his solar panels with bogus aesthetic violations. Some people never learn, but that's fine by me. It just means it's time to make another phone call. So what about you? What's your worst HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments. Your story might be next. We love seeing justice served to petty tyrants who forget that Americans don't give up family property without a fight. If you enjoyed watching Karen get exactly what she deserved, hit subscribe. We've got plenty more stories where David beats Goliath. And trust me, the next one's even better. Thanks for being with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens finally meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, leave a like, Share your reaction in the comments and subscribe so you're ready for the next wild hotel.